Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our new study in Metaphysics by Bowne. Bowne Parker Bowne, published in 1882. And Bowne was the professor who taught Brightman at Boston University, and really is the founder of the Boston personalism. So we're going to take a look at metaphysics from the point of view of the Boston personalism way back in 1882, published by Harper and Brothers publisher. So it wasn't Harper and Row at the time. In 1882 it was Harper and Brothers. And chapter 1 runs from 27 to 59. And we're going to take a look at chapter 1. We're going to look at the category of being. And the category of being abbreviates three concepts: the real, the concrete, and agency. So we're going to examine the category of being, but we're going to look at the three concepts of the real, the concrete, and agency. So let's begin with the first concept. Let's take a look at block 1, the realm of the real. And Bowne says that being is basically every object of thought, but there are also various kinds of reality. Laws, relations, and events are the real, but things are also the real. So any given object of thought may have various kinds of reality. So he says our question is, what is the real in the field of metaphysics? What do we consider to be the real? Now note too, the real concepts are formed through abstraction from common factors by looking at a multitude of individual instances, and to the concept must be added the missing factor of value for it to become a notion of the real. So the real is conceptual, but it's a value concept. Okay, it is a concept. It is a theoretical abstraction. It is a concept, but it is a value type concept. A value type concept. Now, pure being is without distinction of quality or value, but every object is a specific determinant of the notion of being. Every object is an accident of being. So there is an element of real being in all objects. The essence of being is the inherent part of any object. So we'll take a look at real being in note 3. Real being plus particular determinant equals a specific thing in objective existence. Real being exists in itself. It is the universality of something. It's the universal within a particular. It is the universal. The universal becomes real in the particular, so it is always manifested in a particular instance, but the universal is that ideal reality. And we do posit it as a posited objectivity. We seek to discover the unseen qualities of things. Pure being exists only as a logical concept of that which we perceive to be the universally real within any particular instance, within any particular object. So it exists as a logical concept. So now we take a look at note 4 here, and we look at relation, the idea of relation. Our grasp of the real has an essential relation to reality. It is the subjective scaffolding up against the objective. And I like the way that he created that term there, because in our previous lessons we've always said that Brightman posited the notion of the real as the realm of positing. And Hegel posited the notion of the real as the realm of positing. So we've known that from previous lessons, but I like what Bowne says. He said that a posited reality is a subjective scaffolding. And I like that because a scaffolding is that which is up against the objective as our access to it and as the platform from which we participate in construction of reality. And so I like that term, subjective scaffolding. I think it's a good term for the realm of positing. I really like it. We posit the notion and seek to determine the attributes of value. Therefore, it includes positing, but it also includes praxis. We also know this from our study of Brightman, that Brightman also had the same idea, that we do include a positing, and then we go out of ourselves in that outgoing desire as praxis. So that came from Bowne. We posit a pure affirmation for an object that is already definite in existence. But our positing becomes the ground of manifestation. It is a power unto manifestation of the ideal, the real ideal. And it has to fit into a holistic interaction of the real. So already in Block 1, we're learning that from the very beginning, Bowne is proposing that the real will consist of a system. It's going to be a holistic system, not any singular particular entity, but it's a system which encloses these posited real identities. So we learn from Bowne that in the field of metaphysics, the real is the realm of positing. It is the realm of positing, and it is a logical concept, and it is that which is the ground of the manifestation of actualization. So we can't remain in the abstract. We know that the realm of positing is that realm of the abstract notion of the real. But now we'll go to Block 2 and we'll take a look at the concrete. That's our next step. Take a look at the concrete. And under the concrete, Bowne says that the distinctive mark of being consists in the power of acting. Only the determining has existence. Only the action of determining has existence. We observe this in the function of the abstract notion. The phenomenal world manifests in incessant change and movement. It always manifests itself in action. We must posit the notion of agent for our posited notion. Our posited notion becomes the agency for the movement of action, the movement of change. Posited notion becomes the active ground of the phenomenal world. Being is always essentially active. That which exists must be capable of action, says Bowne. Matter itself possesses its own force of resistance. So even matter in itself is a force. It is a force of resistance to the positing. So matter is not substance, matter is activity for Bowne. And we know from a prior lesson with Brightman that that is exactly what Brightman did teach. Matter is action or activity. Matter is not to be degraded to a notion of just substance. So we'll take a look at action and resistance in Note 2. Any reaction of resistance becomes a factor of effect concerning any posited notion of the real. The bare existence of a thing is never sufficient ground for its perception. There must be a corresponding action of a thing upon us. Materiality is the phenomenal product of the dynamism beneath it. So there is a dynamic movement beneath the material world. Remember, we talked about that before, but Brightman rejected materialistic determinism, and Bowne says the same thing. There's a dynamic movement beneath the material world. We must posit the dynamic theory of matter, which is exactly what Brightman took up. We must posit the dynamic theory of matter. So under dynamic theory, cause equals the union of being and power. Being and power can only be separated in thought, not in actuality. And this takes us to the concept of inherence. Things only exist in their predicates. The invisible real abbreviates being and power. So our posited notion of the real is a posited notion that includes within it both being and power, both together. Our posited notion of the real includes being and power. As posited, it becomes a causal unit. As the posited real, it is always, says Bowne, is always to be considered active agent. We think of agent as a person, but our personal positing, according to Bowne, is active agent. It is active agent itself. Our posited notion of the real becomes the active agent that includes power and being. So that becomes a concrete causal unit. So we have our abstract notion of the real, we have our concrete causal unit, and now we can move on to block 3 and that movement of agency. Okay, let's take a look at that third block. Let's take a look at that realm of agency. Agency remains one and indivisible. The phenomenological universe is a manifestation of the hidden power of the real. For something to be real, it must exist as a determining factor of system, a determining factor of the value system. To be is to act. The soul is one such power that rises to conscious activity. So the soul is real as activity also. The real must exist as a determining factor of this value system. Now, under the notion of inaction, something that has passed into complete inaction becomes merely a shadow of thought, a misread imitation. Bowne says matter never relapses into inactivity. Cessation of action is due to self-determination, failure of energy, or the repressive action of another agent. So inaction is not a reality for Bowne. Inaction is a misreading. It is a misread imitation. It is a misread imitation. Now, under coexistence, in Note 3, a thing can exist prior to its specific action, but it cannot exist prior to all action. Our positing as living agent is not a temporal antecedence. Action is coexistent with being. It's a key statement for Bowne. It's a key axiom. Action is coexistent with being. Posited inherence creates a unique spatial distinction. That's an important notion to understand with Bowne and with Brightman both. But posited inherence creates a unique spatial distinction between being and acting. The realm of positing is, I think, best defined as an internal externality. It's not subjective, it's not objective, it is hinged between the subjective and the objective. It's a filter through which we view the world. And that becomes a powerful filter. So I think it's best described as an internal externality. And that's why Bowne says it's a unique spatial distinction. The realm of positing is uniquely spatial because it's not subjective and it's not purely objective. It's a internal externality as a filter through which we view the world, a sign model of interpretation through which we view the world. It has a unique spatial distinction. Positive being is a self-centered activity without a distinction of parts. Agent and agency are posited together. Anything that falls into a specific class possesses a certain mark. These identifying marks vary in intensity. One thing might have more motion than another. One posited reality might have more motion than another. The measure of being is its extent and intensity of its action. So the power of actualization for a posited notion of the real is its measure of being. It becomes the measure of being. Now, under measure, things appear as agents in system. System is composed of uncompounded real units. They are causal units. They are true realities. System is the unity of the complexity of these true realities. Every true thing is a definite causal unit. So Bowne says we construct a system of definite related causal units. And you might think here, basically, another way to say it is a definite causal unit is a category, okay? That's a category. So our system is going to include these definite causal units, these categories, and those categories are going to abbreviate a series of concepts or principles. Remember, when we studied Brightman, we had the categorical laws, and then we had the conceptual principles. Bowne's teaching that here. We're going to construct a system of definite causal units or categories, but those categories are going to abbreviate concepts, just like Hegel taught. Like Hegel taught, like Bowne taught, like Brightman taught. So what we get in this lesson is the category of being as that which abbreviates the abstract notion of the real, the concrete causal unit, and the movement of agency as the actualization of these true realities in different intensities, and the degree with which they actualize determines the measure of their being. So that's going to wrap up this lesson from page 27 to 59 on the ontological notion of being and the concepts of the real, the concrete, and agency.